Who's allowed to participate in Indigenous culture? Am I allowed to learn if I'm not Native? Or what if I don't look like, talk like, or act how a stereotypical Indigenous person is supposed to? In this video, I'll be talking about restrictions on participating in Indigenous culture and how exactly to know who can practice and the mistakes you might be making that are preventing you from participating in Indigenous culture. Hi there, I'm Mallory, and welcome back to the Tribal Trade channel, where we share new videos every single week about smudging Indigenous culture and how to live with resilience. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so that you never miss a video. Have you ever set a requirement on yourself that has prevented you from learning Indigenous culture? Or told yourself that you can only participate in Indigenous cultural practices or ceremonies if you meet a certain requirement, such as having permission from someone or being of Indigenous background? This video is all about how to deal with strict rules and restrictions on who is allowed to participate in Indigenous cultural practices. At Tribal Trade, we've helped tens of thousands of Indigenous people, Indigenous allies, and tribal organizations to understand rules and restrictions surrounding who's allowed to learn, participate, and celebrate Indigenous culture. I've put together 5 steps to be 100% confident surrounding rules and restrictions for learning Indigenous culture. We first explained this new concept in a workshop series that we delivered to thousands of participants who ranked this process as the most powerful and helpful piece of information for understanding why so many Indigenous people and allies are being held back from learning and participating in Indigenous culture. So let's get into this 5-step process for how to understand why these are in place and how you can be 100% confident surrounding who's allowed to be involved in Indigenous cultural practices. All right, so let's get into it. The first step for dealing with rules and restrictions for learning Indigenous culture is to have a clear understanding that these requirements are limiting beliefs. Now, what is a limiting belief? A limiting belief is a state of mind or thought that restricts you from doing something or restricts you in other ways. Having a requirement for doing anything is 100% a limiting belief. For example, I don't get along with my Indigenous relatives, therefore I can't connect with them or learn the Indigenous culture. These are requirements for participating in the culture that we are imposing on ourselves. I've heard this so many times where Indigenous family members are estranged from their families, and it's a tough subject. Sometimes it's presumed to be easier to not participate in the culture because it causes so much pain and hurt to think about anything associated with their Indigenous family members. This conflict causes many people to simply avoid the culture altogether. A limiting belief is powerful and negative and sometimes convinces someone that they can't do something. People can get trapped in a negative cycle of limiting beliefs and in non-inclusive mindsets. Having a requirement for doing something is 100% a limiting belief. Here are some examples for requirements for people for participating in Indigenous culture. 1, looking like a stereotypical Native person. 2, you need to live on First Nation lands. 3, you need to speak your native language. 4, you need to belong to a tribal community. Or 5, you need someone to give you permission to attend a ceremony, such as an elder. Once we set these requirements on ourselves, we will naturally impose them onto others. What are some restrictions that you have thought about that have prevented you from doing something? Let us know in the comments below. Now on to the second step. The second step for dealing with rules and restrictions for learning Indigenous culture is to learn where the requirements come from in the first place. So where do these rules and requirements for participating come from? The first is government. Rules, order, or justification for doing things comes from a lot of different places, but primarily requirements for being a real Indigenous person came from within the government due to the Indian Act, where they created laws, guidelines to identify Indigenous people. That's the truth. That is the source here, and that's where this originally came from. That's why all of this started in the first place. The second point is colonization. Colonization was created to control us as a group of people, to assimilate Native people into a society that the government wanted. From there, residential schools created even stricter rules, making the rules and requirements for cultural participation so strict that it was illegal to practice Indigenous culture. Only within the last few decades have Indigenous people been allowed to start celebrating our culture again. Severe traumas at residential schools has resulted from harsh abuse and consequences for practicing the culture. This has caused many Indigenous people to be too scared to even do it anymore. People were speaking the language, playing drums, and practicing ceremonies in secret and behind closed doors. These habits that we had that were formed from having to hide and keep the culture alive and in secret was out of necessity and out of desperation. This is when we speak about generational trauma. This trauma that we've experienced has been passed down to younger generations and younger generations. That is what generational trauma is. So now that you understand why we set these requirements on ourselves, it makes it a little bit easier to understand and be compassionate towards ourselves and start to take the steps towards dealing with and accepting what has happened. Now, the third step for dealing with restrictions for learning Indigenous culture is to address your own requirements. So what happens if you don't address the requirements you've set for participating in the culture? This is going to create problems for you if you don't deal with these ideas and requirements that you have set for yourself. This is a problem that can lead to you not meeting one of your own requirements, guaranteed. And it's going to prevent you from connecting with the culture and from making long-lasting relationships with people within the culture as well. It's unfortunately a spiral of negativity because a limiting belief that you can never fulfill or satisfy can really enter into an extreme territory. This spiral of negativity can cause gatekeeping in the culture, which in turn will make all of the beauty within the culture and the healing potential no longer accessible to the people who might need it most. There's also the possibility you could become a gatekeeper by setting these requirements onto other people. Now, that is the worst case scenario. Have you ever been held back from doing something that you wanted to do because of a limiting belief? If so, what was it? Let me know in the comments below. Now, the fourth step for dealing with rules and restrictions for learning Indigenous culture is to be aware of the risks in setting extreme requirements. Here are some of the examples of extreme requirements that some people can set. Proudly Indigenous means that you gatekeep the culture and that you protect it and you don't share it. Being proudly Indigenous means you show up to every activist march, confront every racist person, and that you borderline become aggressive. You scrutinize other backgrounds and put them down to bring Indigenous culture up. It can be really easy when you're desperately trying to belong to your culture and feel the strong sense of connection to know where the healthy balance is, and you end up compensating for feeling like you need to be a real Indigenous person. So you end up going above and beyond. It starts with setting basic requirements and limiting beliefs, and then it slowly spirals into some of these extreme requirements. This can easily bring other people down through gatekeeping the culture and by judging other people who might share the same identity crisis that you do. Now, the fifth step for dealing with rules and restrictions for learning Indigenous culture is to remove them completely. The solution to this is just that. We must remove these requirements for participating in Indigenous culture. We must go from exclusive to inclusive. A great way you can accomplish this is by using the medicine wheel teaching of inclusivity, shared contribution, and collective worth. That always helps me to bring me back to why inclusive is always the answer. First of all, it just feels good. But second of all, the medicine wheel teaching tells us so. The medicine wheel teaching teaches us about all four nations of people being all four colors who share the same future. Now that's the traditional teaching. If you want to learn more about the medicine wheel, click on the link right here. What the medicine wheel teaches us is that there is a shared collective worth and that all people contribute to the well-being and care of our Mother Earth. In traditional teachings, inclusion is the answer, not exclusion. The real answer here for being a proud Indigenous person is that you respect all nations, all backgrounds, and you support sharing the culture. If you're interested in learning more about Indigenous culture, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for new videos just like this one. Becoming interested in Indigenous education is the first step in an enlightening journey. It's an honor to make this video and open your eyes to the world of Indigenous education. Feel free to check out our website, tribaltradeco.com, as it has a ton of resources that can help you with Indigenous education. We've got most important links down in the description. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time.